Well, hello everyone, good evening, and welcome to ADVMoto Live number 29. Tonight we're talking about the KLR 650, the new one, 2022, hit or miss. There's no doubting the amazing community surrounding Kawasaki's KLR 650 is long-standing, and it's their most renowned dual sport in the United States. After 35 years and 3 generations of evolution, the KLR 650 is back with more changes than ever, with more mid-size adventure bikes available in the United States. Will it be a hit or miss? What do you need to know before getting one? All that on tonight's ADVMoto Live number 29. But first, I want to make a very fast announcement, something that we're personally very excited about over here at ADVMoto. We are continuing the ADV Illustrated Madness with our first ever 2022 calendar on Kickstarter. It is a single panel comic series called The Far Ride. You can see it on all of our social media too as well, but this is an actual physical product that we are launching on Kickstarter. It's already met 100% funding, but we've got some great prizes. Revit put in a $300 prize voucher for some really sweet stuff. Turkana Gear also has donated one of their handlebar bags, which is really sweet. Got one on my Himalayan. But there's also all kinds of other rewards on there, keychains, coasters. But please visit the link in the description or search The Far Ride on Kickstarter to check it out. Any help spreading the word is appreciated. And we hope that this one really takes off and people really appreciate it. But now, on with the show. Well, all right. Our feature guests tonight are no mystery if you've been in the KLR community for the past few years. Both have extensive experience with nearly all aspects of the model line, and we're really happy that they could make it on tonight's show to talk about this new model and answer some of your questions. Without further ado, everyone, please welcome Eagle Mike, Jesse Kimball, and ADVMoto test rider, Dan DiMaio.
What's going on?
How's it going, guys? What's the good word?
Just looking forward to doing this tonight. It's one of my absolute favorite topics.
What, the KLR 650?
That's right.
Right on, right on. Mike, are you checking in over there with the audio?
You bet. Good to see you guys. Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And let me just ask you guys where you're from. You know, Dan and I are based out of Virginia, but where are you guys?
Go ahead, Jess.
I actually live and work I go between Virgin, Utah, which is close to Zion National Park, and Temecula, California. So I'm in Temecula, California right now.
Capitol Reef dog in the house.
That's right.
Sorry.
Cool. Well, I'm in the East County, San Diego area. Lived here for a long time, and it's a good place to be to ride.
Right on, right on. So you guys are not too far away from each other then, yeah?
No, it is a blessing living this close to Eagle Mike if you own a KLR 650.
Wow, right on, right on. Yeah, we already have a question from someone in the audience for Eagle Mike, but we'll roll into that a little bit later. So can you give us some background, guys, on, you know, how did you guys really fall in love with the KLR? I mean, let's be honest, there are, you know, hotter, flashier bikes out there, right? You know, but when did you guys first get into the KLR, and, you know, why do you guys stick with it?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I got my first experience right after I started my shop. I was making some custom tools and a few super custom parts for a local guy. And when I finally got on, at the time I was riding all street bikes, and I tested out a few dual sports, but most of them were too small. I'm about 6'2". I wasn't always this big, but always been at least like 225 for a long time. And they all felt kind of tight, you know, just tight coupled, not enough room. And as soon as I got on the KLR, it just felt right. And that's how I got started.
Right on. I got started. I was living in southern Utah, St. George area, riding dirt bikes for Honda 450Xs, and I'd go into the shop. There's a local shop there that was like a Kawasaki KTM dealer, and I kept looking at this KLR. I had more and more interest in having something that was street legal, but I did not want just a street bike, and it was priced right. I think the first one I bought was close to $5,000, brand new, a Gen 3. It was a 2009, and fell in love with it. Started attending some events that were KLR 650, organized for KLR 650s, and fell even more in love with it. Fell in love with the guys that I was riding with, and just the whole community, everything around it has just kind of kept me locked in on the KLR 650.
Right on, right on. So I mean, how many versions of this bike have you guys owned, and how many of them have you owned? I know you guys have owned a bunch, but it's so many I've kind of lost the mental track.
I've owned a lot, just a lot, and I've got an 87 in my shed at home, and I don't think there might be a year or two that I've missed, but not very many, and so I've had all generations from the 87 to then they made some changes, a little later, and I got one of those. And so, I've had probably 20 or more go through my hands. And
wow.
He's got me beat.
It's a lot of KLRs.
Yeah, that is a ton of KLRs. I got to ask you, Mike, are there any that were your favorite for any reason? I mean, even though you could have identical machines, over time they sort of take on their own personalities in a weird way. Did you have any bikes that were your favorite, or you had some memorable experiences on?
I think my favorite is my 2006. It's fairly extensively modified. Kerry Aspey, who passed in 2008, he was riding his KLR when he was hit, but great guy. And he had done in those days, I didn't do my own cylinders and heads or have them done local. And he did a cylinder and a head for me. And then I did a bunch of other stuff to it. And it's got a 705 piston, which is light and it's more torquey than the stock. Got a big brake rotor on it, got the big IMS tank on it. And it's Kawasaki green. It's got the green IMS tank on it. So it's a gorgeous bike. It runs smooth. It's super comfortable, and I went to South Dakota with a bunch of guys and met some more KLR guys up there. Rode around for a week up there. Rode around Washington and Oregon with Wattman, both on both rides. So that's my favorite bike of all of them. But I'm liking. I mean, none of them are bad. They're all great.
Yeah, awesome. And Jesse?
I've gone through 4 Gen 2s. So I had an 09, which was my first one. I had 2 2014.5s, which had some improvements. One being the suspension, which was a big deal to me. And I had a 2018, and the seat. And then so I went through 4 Gen 2s, and then I bought a 2007, which was my first Gen 1. Which is evolving. I'm slowly modifying that, and I actually have had a lot of fun just cruising around on it. I probably get more attention on that one than on any of the other bikes. And then I did recently pick up a new 2022 Gen 3, which so far on the freeway has been kind of my favorite bike for the longer trips.
Well, all right, that's awesome. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and rock straight into some talk about the new model. There's plenty there to talk about. We even start with Dan on this one here. Let's say, so when this first came out, they had leaked, I guess, some ideas about this just shortly before. Like, it wasn't like the T7 where we heard about it for 3 years before we actually saw one, right? So they had leaked, I guess, some images out on this shortly before we actually, got them, which means that they were pretty close to production by the time we heard, much about it, but what was your first or your first thoughts about the new model, or your reactions to it when it came out, Dan? I mean, what did you think?
I mean, I definitely like the new styling on the bodywork. So, I mean, aesthetically, I really like the look of the bike, you know, as compared to the 2014 and a half, which was the last bike that I rode from the KLR. But first impressions, I like the design and the rework bodywork. And then, you know, obviously riding the bike is a whole different story, which we'll delve down into, I'm sure, here in a minute.
Yeah. And how about you guys, Mike, Jesse? I mean, what did you think? I mean, you guys are so invested in this. You must have had some thoughts about it.
I definitely did. I mean, honestly, if I didn't even see what it looks like, I probably would have bought one anyway, just because it's the new KLR. But as soon as I saw it, I just aesthetically, it's a little bit more attractive than the Gen 2. You know, I'd probably say Gen 3, Gen 1, Gen 2 as far as looks go. And then just some of the features, you know, the bright lights, the brighter lights, the spotlights on the adventure model, a few of those features. I just thought, okay, I need one of those.
Yeah, Mike, what'd you think?
My first impression was that they did a lot of the favorite things. If I had a choice, if I was going to tell them what to build, they did 3 out of 4 things. They kept the price the same.
Yeah.
They did FI. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Although, you know, some guys swear by carburetors, EFI should give you a little more power and a little more mileage, right? And you don't have to worry about the carb coming up. So the price is the same, and EFI, and they have ABS available, and it's not too expensive. And then the only thing that I didn't like was the weight. So I like it. I think it's, and like you guys said, it's a great looking bike. They did a good job. I think they did a really good job on this.
Now, how does this match up, you know, like around the campfire, right? When they halted the sale of the KLR, right? There was, I mean, that was kind of like a superstar dying in the, you know what I mean? Like in the media, you know what I mean? Like a superstar musician dying in the media. It was like, dude, they got rid of the KLR, you know, like at that point in time, you know, how did you guys feel about, you know what, they're just going to bring it back like the old Coke or something? Or did you guys pretty much think that, okay, that was the end of the run?
I thought it was the end of the run, personally.
Yeah. What'd you guys think?
You know what? I actually thought it was the end of the run for the KLR 650 and thought maybe they'd be bringing something with a twin in. One of the reasons is it's like, I know people that have worked at Kawasaki and nobody would say a word. I mean, there was not even a whisper of another KLR 650 coming out of Kawasaki. So I just thought, okay, this thing's done.
Yeah. Mike?
I was hopeful they'd come back. But I thought there was about a 60-70% chance it wasn't coming back. You know, and a lot of people, one thing we haven't touched on too much, but the fact that this one's EFI, people had speculated for years and years that it was was going to be killed due to smog, right? And the only thing is Suzuki and Honda are still selling 650 dual sports and carbureted. So I was not positive that it was, and it was kind of due in the life cycle, you know, how often they would make some kind of changes. So the fact that they made big changes, but I think that's why it took so long to come back.
Yeah. Well, what were the generation years? I know this one is tough without being able to look, you know, at a computer and look these up, but you guys might just know it off the top of your head. And you know, and there was also like sub models in the KLR history too, to a certain extent. I think not only with the more bulbous, like the 2008 revision, and they had was it a 14 and a half? Is that what it was? Yeah. Then they had a small like revision, right? But even before that, I think they had a couple like revisions from the first gen, right?
Yeah. So the technically the first gen's 87 to 07. And then the Gen 2 is 09 to 18. And then, of course, we got the Gen 3, and the 87 had some unique things in the engine, but all the bodywork is interchangeable from 87 to 07, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then they made from 88 to 89. That was one version. And then 90 to mid 96, and then 96 to 07. And then, you know, there was some changes in, you know, of course, 09. And then there were changes like change the frame color and stuff. But then they changed the clutch in 2011 and the radiator a little bit, even though it's the same, or the fan. And, you know, there was a bunch of little tiny stuff they did. But the bodywork, of course, is the same on all Gen 2s. So that's kind of nice too. So you can always find parts for your bike.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. Now, where was the KLR sold besides the United States?
Well, I get guys calling me for parts for all over the world. You know, I'm from the Middle East to New Zealand, Australia. I've sent parts to Malaysia. I think I've sent some parts to Japan once, but Israel, Germany, Russia, Turkey, Netherlands, Norway. You know, I think, you know, KLR is just, it's been around so long and so useful that, and then they had the, you know, and we had the A model and the E model, but they had the B model we had here for a little while, the 10 guy, right?
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Yeah.
1990.
Yeah, and that was sold longer overseas. And then they had the C model that was in Canada and Australia, New Zealand, and Europe and the UK for sure.
So it was in Europe.
Yeah, they had the they had the C model in Europe, and I don't know how many, you know, and I don't know where they came from, but I know guys have called me looking for parts there.
Wow. You know, the folks in Malaysia are mad Kawasaki. Like, I don't know if you've ever been there, but I don't know what it is, but the Malaysians love Kawasaki. I was born there. I've been over there. I used to ride around those little step-throughs and go chill out with the people in the sunset overlooking the water, and they would just love Kawasaki. There was more green there, I think, than I've seen like anywhere. So it's really cool that you mentioned that, man. There's mad cow love over there. Well, that's awesome. So we have a lot of generations, you know, and we've seen some really big changes made to this new model. So how much time, you know, have you guys spent on one? How does it ride? Now, Dan went to our junket test ride, you know. So Dan, I mean, just off of a short, you know, time of riding it, not actually being a person that's ridden a lot of KLRs, what were your thoughts on it?
I mean, I've ridden a fair amount of the Gen 2, like the 08s, you know, back in the dealer days. And then, of course, you know, we did the 2014 and a half junket, and the improvements they did on that were great. But, you know, instantly right off the bat, throwing the leg over it the first time out in New Mexico, you know, it starts quicker, it idles cleaner. You know, the improvements that they did with the rubber mounted bar mounts, rubber mounted seat, rubber mounted foot pegs, you know, all those things they just stood out right immediately, you know, especially riding the road to get to the trails. You know, we had some journalists that were, you know, finicky about the pegs and whatnot, but, you know, first impression, I was like, wow, the improvements they did on this bike were instantly noticeable right off the bat.
Wow, right on. Jesse?
Me, I bought mine in St. George, Utah, right behind the shop there where I bought it. I mean, it's Southern Utah, so you don't have to go very far to hit a trail. So within a mile, I went off road, and immediately I'm going like, what are the improvements to the suspension? You know, not even really thinking about everything they did into the handlebars, into the foot pegs, but it just felt so much smoother than the Gen 2 for some reason. It kind of blew me away. And then immediately, you know, the next day, jumped on the bike. I rode mine kind of a hard break in at about 75 or 80 miles an hour for about 420 miles back to Temecula, and immediately better wind protection, a little bit smoother, more power. And at 75 or 80, I didn't burn any oil.
Ooh.
There was no oil burn. And I've ridden it from Utah to Temecula. And now I've ridden it back from Temecula back to Utah, just straight up the 15 and no oil burn. So Mike can explain why better than, or he probably has an idea why. I have no idea why. I'm just glad it didn't burn any. So that was a big one for me.
It actually made the piston round.
I've heard they do that these days with all that high tolerance manufacturing. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, on the oil, well, let me talk about the bike then, and then we'll.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, the bike ride's great. Like you said, you guys said that no improvements are noticeable right away. I noticed that the frame felt stiffer, you know, because having the all one piece frame instead of the separate subframe, your seat's not wiggling around as much instead of that on that one or two little bolts, you know, on the subframe thing. And so to me, it felt like a more just together bike. And you know, I think they did a pretty good job on the EFI. You know, a lot of bikes have snatchiness, and I haven't noticed that. You can make it do it, but generally it's one of the better bikes. And so the only thing that I wish I could do was adjust the idle speed down, because it, you know, their idle spec is 1500, which is a little fast, but I think they did that to get rid of the off idle response problems that a lot of bikes have, you know, because it's idling faster. So you've got a little more momentum in the engine, you know, the flywheel. But as far as the piston, you know, I looked up the part numbers, and the part number is the same as the 18. And so I think you just got a good bike, Jesse.
Hard braking. It works.
That's it.
Lots of heat.
Good juju.
Yeah. Right now, you know, there was one upgrade that, you know, got dragged out on social media that I think people were missing. I understand why they didn't do it, because it would have definitely affected the price point of the bike, and that was a 6-speed, right? So instead they modified the transmission a little bit. I think they made that top gear a little taller. I mean, is that what they did?
I mean, from first to second, which for the most part on all KLRs I've ridden, the first to second's a huge leap. I mean, but I didn't really notice that much difference between the 14.5 and the 2022. But, you know, I did, for whatever reason, the first to second gap, I noticed quite a bit.
It just felt larger.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
I haven't noticed, to be honest, I haven't noticed any difference. I'll have to look at the numbers, because my thought was it was the same transmission, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at in the manual. I've got the shop manuals, but that's one thing I didn't look at.
Yeah, I do seem to remember that there was some revision to that. I could be totally wrong, so don't quote me on that. Jesse, what do you?
Oh, I was just saying it feels like a KLR. It feels like you're riding a KLR 650. So if you're a KLR 650 guy, you're going to love the way this feels. Everything's just feels a little bit more refined from like a Gen 2.
Now, how about all the rubber dampening and stuff like that? You know what I mean? Like, you know, because they rubber mounted the foot pegs,
foot pegs, handlebars, and the seat. I mean, those are actually really cool improvements, but you know, rubber mounting the handlebars are things they should have been doing in Gen 2. I mean, you know, rubber mounting handlebars is nothing new, and it doesn't cost them that much to do it. But yeah, you definitely notice all those improvements at highway. I mean, it takes away a lot of the vibes, and it just makes it more pleasant when you're cruising at 70 to 75 miles an hour on the highway.
Wow. Did you guys notice the same thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
The wind protection's better. And I think I remember what you're referring to, the changes maybe in the transmission. They did some micro polishing on 4th and 5th gears. So actually had some fretting problems on some of the later Gen 2s. And then the 3rd gear dogs, once in a while they would break, and that could stop the motor, you know, or break the engine, break the transmission. But they did beef up 3rd gear dog, and they did a better job of heat treating and polishing 4th and 5th, I understand. And I'll check that and get back to you on any gearing changes.
Sure. Now, you know, one of the other things that people also called out a lot was the weight, right? So I mean, there was obviously some weight added, especially if you consider, you know, versus the first generation. But I got to be honest with you, if they stuck a larger tank and a full fairing on a DR 650, it would probably pick up a couple pounds too as well, right?
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, how important is that really? I mean, you know, like how much of a difference does it make, you know, as far as your riding experience or your riding goals, you know, when you have a bike that has that power to weight ratio?
It's just picking it up.
Yeah.
I mean, Gen 1 to the current generation, I mean, I think it's almost 120 pounds difference from like the 87 Gen 1 to the current Gen 3 2022 non-ABS base model. I think it's about 120 pounds. That's a lot of weight over the years. I mean, we are America, so we all get fatter as we get older. But 120 pounds that's a lot.
Yeah, Mike, where do you think all that weight came from, man?
Oh, the frame, longer swing arm, bigger discs, you know, adding a few sensors and stuff. I think most of it's the frame, to be honest with you, and the front suspension and the frame attach points. They've got a lot more of those going on. Like all the weight on the Gen 2 was the weight change there was on the front end. You know, they added a bigger front subframe and all the body work and the heavier forks and the bigger brakes. So all that weight was on the front end. And this is kind of just more the same. I don't, as far as the weight change though, I don't think it's going to take the, you know, the guys that care a lot about weight are going to ride KTMs, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, and this, you know, they've eliminated the potential failure point of the subframe braking and the bolts breaking there. So, and the bike just feels, to be honest, it feels, hey, don't tell anybody, but it feels kind of like a BMW.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, those sticker sales are going to go through the roof.
Yeah, there's going to be mad sticker sales.
But you know, the thing just feels more coherent. It's not as much of a rattle trap as it used to be.
I haven't lost any bolts yet.
See?
All the bolts are still there.
Is the engine hard mounted?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. You know, I was a huge fan of the Versys. I was more Versys, I think, maybe than Kawasaki themselves. I loved that platform. You know, we even threw 1719 custom wheels on ours, and it was just a tremendous bike. I wished and hoped that they would make one. You know what I mean? But
we all can hope.
Yeah, you know, but the original Versys had a hard mounted engine. And you know, when you put some gas in that parallel twin, you could really feel it. It was kind of exciting. But then they rubber mounted it, you know, to make it like more comfortable and stuff like that. And I think it lost a little bit of its exhilarating. Yeah, you know what I mean? There was just something to it, you know. But a lot of people don't know this, but even the 2008, right? Like the Gen 2, when they got that more bulbous fairing and that headlight, a lot of that was pulled from a model that was never sold here. It was called the KLE 500. I mean, if you go back to like 2007, 2006, and you look at the fairing for the KLE 500, which was never offered in the United States, you can see they pretty much pulled that off of the KLE 500 and they stuck it on the KLR. They made it larger and you know, and taller. But I always loved the KLE 500 because it had snorkels. I mean, the thing was crazy, and it used the Ninja 500 motor. It had a lower seat height, and you know, and stuff like that. And I really wish that they had brought that here. I don't know how, you know, I mean, that would have been in direct competition with the KLR 650. I think for sure it would have been in the same market space. You know, what do you guys think would have happened if they had brought the KLE 500 to the US? And if there's anyone listening and they haven't looked up the bike, go check that bike out. Just look at a picture of it, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I personally think that bike would have sold like hotcakes. I mean, the weight was very comparable wet. I think there was maybe 5 pounds, 6 pounds difference between the KLR 650 Gen 1 and the KLE 500. And the 500 put out more horsepower. I thought it was a cooler looking bike for sure. I mean, I don't know about Jesse or Mike, but I really dig the KLE 500.
The lower seat height would have sold some bikes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and my memory is that engine had a 6-speed transmission, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ninja 500 had a 6-speed transmission.
Yeah, so that would have, and that was known for being another bulletproof engine, right?
Just
Yeah.
rock solid.
Like
Yeah.
the Ninja 250 also.
Yeah.
You could work the crap out of that engine almost to an unnatural level, and it would just keep giving it to you. I mean, it was amazing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, there is still, I guess, some rumors. Rumors, of course, right, going around the digital world. That that the parallel twin could still be applied into a dual sport enduro KL line. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Do you guys think that's possible? Is it a pipe dream? Are they gonna ride the new version of the 650, like the KLR 650 out for a little while, or what?
I mean, at the junket, talking with the guys from Kawasaki and just drilling in and going, was really hoping for a parallel twin middleweight bike, more performance oriented. They would just go through things like, well, we don't want to compete with that. This KLR 650 is going to sell 3 times the amount of it as an Africa Twin, an 890, a T7, and all that. And I was like, I get that, but you've got a guy that starts off on a KLR 650 and he wants a little more performance and he wants to move up. You don't have anything for him to move up to, so you just lost a customer. And he goes, well, yeah, we get that. So over and over, it's just like, I was really hoping for something better. By the end of the junket, I did get a twinkle in one of the guys' eyes about having a move up bike. So I wouldn't say it's totally out of the question. I think give it 2-3 years, and I personally think we'll see something come out that's a little more performance oriented. Obviously it's going to have a higher price point, but utilizing that versus 650 parallel twin power plant.
Yeah, right on. This is the thing. Like, if I take a look at the evolution of the Versus 650, it gained a lot of weight, right? It just kind of got taller and more top heavy, and all that stuff. What do you guys think the chances are that, Kawasaki will go to a more sport oriented, version for their consumer level dual sport? So for example, right, like Honda and Yamaha have a rally racing, programs, international rally racing programs. And I think there's no doubt they take the technology and the design philosophies from those, from their racing programs, and they put them into the bikes, which are made on the consumer level. And that's why I think the T7 did so well. I think it basically answered a question for a lot of consumers, which was, I want a mid-sized bike that is low maintenance and looks like a rally bike. You know what I mean? And then, the price point on that worked really well too. It's $10,000. Now at $10,000 versus the KLR, you're actually putting it into a different category. I mean, it's almost a different basket of apples, right? So let's be fair. But it fundamentally answered the question of, or it met the demand for what I think a lot of people were looking for, and now we can't even really find them, right? Because I mean, there's way more demand for them than there is supply. Honda, I think similar to a certain extent, although I guess their consumer level bikes are still kind of hefty. But the main thing though is do you think Kawasaki will bring some of that racing oriented philosophy and technology into their consumer level adventure dual sports?
That's a really good question. And I'll give you a little bit of history here just for fun. Right after the 08s came out, Kawasaki had a KLR owners group meeting up in Irvine, right? So they wanted a bunch of KLR owners to come up and talk to them. And we didn't know it. We didn't get the word, but they wanted everybody that had bought a Gen 2. And it turned out there was only a couple of us. Everybody else had Gen 1s. But they were trying to sell us on the Versus. And you wouldn't believe, they said, why don't you want the Versus? And everybody's like, nope, we want a KLR. It's got a flat seat. You remember the Gen 1 had this dish seat and you couldn't move around, and it had the, the smaller wheels and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a spot, as long as they'll keep the thing kind of dirt oriented so it's capable, kind of like the the spoke wheel V-Strom. And
Right.
and I would like to see them do a 750. You can do a parallel twin. I love the feel of a V-twin, but more money and more harder to package. So I think a 750 or 800 would be a really awesome bike. You could be a great adventure bike, do the whole world, have plenty of power for 2-up, do anything with it, put a 6-speed transmission, and sell it at the same price point as the T7, or maybe a little under. What do you think?
Like $9,000 or something?
I think it's a great idea or hope or dream. I actually owned a T7. I bought one and I've actually since sold it. If Kawasaki could do something similar and keep it simple, like a T7, not too much tech, I think they'd have a home run, because you guys ride enough and have enough friends in the community that it seems like most of the new bikes, and I won't name any brands, but a lot of the new bikes with a ton of tech, more expensive adventure bikes that have all the different traction control settings and ABS and whatever, all the tech, it seems like they're all having issues. I can't tell you how many of my friends have spent a fortune on big adventure bikes and have some that are overly complicated and have some sort of issue from losing a key. You lose a key with some of these bikes and you're just stranded, and good luck getting a key quickly.
And then of course there's sensors.
Yeah. There's so many
Tons
things
of
that can
sensors.
go wrong that the T7 is a good example of something that's just was kept pretty darn simple. If something goes wrong and you are on a trip around the world, you're probably going to be able to figure it out without having to plug it into a computer. So if Kawasaki could do something similar along those lines, they'd have a home run.
Oh,
Right on.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it would be no brainer, and it would give that kind of chance for someone to step up into a new line, because that happens all over the place when models, I'd say, don't get upgraded or like revised frequently enough. One of my favorite examples is the DRZ, right? Like the DRZ, I love the motor on the DRZ and I love the platform of the DRZ, but similar, right? Carbureted, 5-speed, and so people, once they get used to that and they want something more lighter, more pep or whatever, or they go off, because where are you going to go from the DRZ?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, what?
Yeah, you either got to go V-Strom if you're going to stay Suzuki, or you got to switch brands.
Yeah, but if you want a light dual sport, the V-Strom is a great bike, and I love the engines. Those V-twins and those Suzukis are fantastic motors, right? And they've been put in everything, and they never die, right?
Right.
But it's not a 400.
No.
You know what I mean? It's not a 400, 450 thumper. The frame is larger. The thing must weigh another 120 pounds plus, or 30, 40 pounds plus, or something like that. You know what I mean? But as a result, they go to, largely KTMs or something like that, right? It's like, there's my 6th speed, plus I've shaved a couple pounds. You know what I mean? What's this, orange and stuff?
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So it's tough.
With the KTMs, like back in the day, it was, having a resource for parts. But now, there's just as many corner KTM dealerships around the world as there are Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha. So, parts is no longer a concern with KTM. And I used to hate KTM. Now I own 2 of them. But
Good thing those parts stores are close by.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that's right.
I've really had no issues with my 1190R. Just a couple sensors here and there, like you said, the tech. But all in all, it's been a great bike. But I would love to buy a Kawasaki 750, 800 parallel twin, performance middleweight adventure bike.
Love the Versus 300.
Versus is a blast to ride, especially after you figure out you have to wind the piss out of it to get power out of it. But once you learn that thing's a hoot to ride.
But that is a truly versatile small bike that basically anyone can get on and have fun and do a little bit of gravel or something. I mean, you can't do heavy trail riding with it or anything, but you can get on a little bit of gravel and it's not going to destroy anything, but you can commute on it. It's crazy mileage.
It's like when it came out, everybody knew about it, and then now nobody knows about it.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I do want to do here real fast is interject a question from the audience, because Eagle Mike is a superstar in the community. So we have a question here. Let me cue this up here. What do we got? All right, it's from Kawa Dude McDouble, and the question is, Mike, what is the story with the fabled KLR stroker? He said you built a couple prototypes of, and is that as far as it's going to go? I think he wants to know if you're going to do more with that in mass production.
I don't know about mass production, but we are going to build them. Couple things happened. I got cancer, a lot of guys know that, in 2018, and it took me out for the whole year. And I'm still a little bit weak, and then the guy that was working with me on that, my local guy that could do the crank building, he got a brain tumor and ended up having that removed, and he can't work anymore. So I built some tooling, and I'm going to do the crank building here. And there's a guy local that can weld them. And I do have pistons and I have rods, and we can do it. And is it okay if I go into a little bit of detail about it?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So the cool thing about this plan is we can put it in the stock crankcases. We don't need a spacer under the cylinder. So we can build a stroker that's a 762, and we don't need a spacer. We do have to rebuild the crank, and I think it's best in the Gen 1 or the early Gen 2s because they changed the clutch in 2011, and they took away one set of plates. And there's a few people that have had problems with them slipping. You could do it in the later one, but you'd have to up the springs, But the fact that it bolts into everything. There's no clearance problems. From the outside, it looks like a stock motor, and it's super torquey. It is super torquey. So we are going to build them. I can't give you a date because you can edit this out later if you want or whatever. But like I said, I'm going to be slowed down. I got a little more cancer, got diagnosed a couple of weeks ago. So that's going to slow me down for a little bit, but I am going to build them. I have the parts. We're going to build an initial lot of 4, and then we're going to build another 12, and we'll go on from there. And I don't know about mass production because it's a lot of work to split the cases. The average guy, and my concern is that the average guy might not do everything right, and you got to do everything right. Everybody thinks they can work on a KLR because it's a simple bike. But the key for doing a good job with anything is you got to focus. You can't be sloppy. So it'll work. We'll get there.
That's right. All of the screws and nuts and washers are not optional.
Yeah.
You have to put every single one of them back in that you took out. That is truth right there, right? Well, all right. So if someone wanted to contact you, about that, what's the best way? Just go to your website or give you a call or what? I mean, how do you?
Yeah, my info's on eaglemike.com,
Okay.
And there's a contact me through there that I got working, and my phone number's on there also.
Okay, excellent. Well, this actually brings us into the next thing here, which is okay, let's get the truth about the doohickey. All right. Can we give a, I mean, I would say probably out of the one, kind of regular tech questions of the KLR that circulates around the most, from what I could tell, this one seems to probably be up there. So can you guys give a brief explanation of what it is and why it may or may not need to be replaced?
Well, can I start with, based on that question directed directly to Kawasaki? They said, no, we didn't do anything different with that because we based that off of service,
Records.
service records and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, so, all right. So I guess it hasn't been done. So I'll let the other two guys divulge on that.
What do you think, guys?
Jesse,
Well,
you want to talk about that?
I'll have a short answer. I would say, yeah, it needs to be done. I've had mine done. I was fortunate enough to have Eagle Mike replace my Gen 3 for me. But I've had Gen 1s and Gen 2s that obviously I've replaced the doohickey. But what I've noticed is even on the Gen 2, I would usually wait 10, 12,000 miles on the bike to replace it. And when I would do regular oil changes, sometimes if it was a lot of off-road, I would do oil changes every 1,000 to 2,500 miles. You loosen it, or you loosen the bolt, you tap on it, try to get the spring to do its thing in there. And what I noticed is when I went to change the doohickey at 10 to 12,000 miles, the doohickey was like, it was stuck to the motor. Or what am I trying to say, Mike? What's the component?
Stuck to the case.
Yeah, it was stuck to the case. So even though I was loosening the bolt and tapping on it, they were like fused together. And it came that way from the factory. So I'm going to say, yeah, you should replace the doohickey. I do think it's necessary.
Mike, what's the official judgment from your perspective on that?
Well, we'll start with a current situation. A lot of people speculated that they were going to change the parts or make it better, whatever, in 2022, and that's not accurate. It's the same parts that they've been selling, or in the Gen. They didn't change it in the Gen 3. It's the same as the Gen 2. Okay. And they did change it in the Gen 2, but they didn't get it right. And there's a couple anecdotes here. Number one is Wattman, he makes some parts in the KLR community also. He's got 187,000 plus on his original 2004 motor. Okay. Original rings, original chains, internal chains. Everything's original in that motor except for wear items, except for third gear dog broke. And we had to split the cases at 142,000 miles. And I checked the bore was round within a thou, and put a new third gear in there. He even put the same rings back in there and same valves, valve heads never been apart. So, but he did the torsion spring at less than 10,000 miles. He did the doohickey at about 3,000. He bought it used with like 1,000 on it. And so the wear is greatly decreased when the system is properly tensioned. And the ideal tension would be no slack and no tension, right? That would be perfect. But the rubber wears on the sprockets because the chain rides on the rubber, which helps keep the engine quiet. And so that those links running over the rubber gradually wear it down. And it wears less when it's properly tensioned. So yes, you want to do the doohickey. Okay. Is that
yeah, sure. And just to backtrack for a second, for those that don't know, the doohickey is a chain tensioner for the balancer. It's not the chain tensioner for the valves or anything that runs at the top. It's a chain tensioner for the balancer. I think a lot of people tend to think that it's for the valves or whatever, but it's not. It's not. It's a small tensioner down at the bottom on the left hand side. So you have pulled a new engine apart already? I mean, have you installed something on the new models yet, Mike?
Yeah. I've installed 4 of them, I think, or 5 of them on 2022s. And I've also looked at the parts list, I'm a big guy for looking at these parts lists. I like to, because then I find out what changed across the various generations and what's compatible. And there's a cool utility on Kawasaki.com. You can actually download and print out the PDF of your parts list and make a notebook. And then you know more about your bike than when you go to the dealer and you want a part, you can make sure you get the right part. And if I'll tell you a quick story, it's kind of funny. I think calling it the doohickey kind of hurt us, because guys would go to the dealer every year when the new model came out, and they'd say, "Did you fix a doohickey?" And the dealer goes, "Man, you're a moron. What's a doohickey?"
That's a technical term. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's in the manual like that.
Yeah.
It's like page 47-4 or so, or whatever. Just fixing the doohickey, right? Knocking the doohickey back into place. So you offer a few solutions for this, right? And what's the difference between what you offer and, you know, what's in there natively?
Well, there's two things that I do. One of them is the machine doohickey or balancer adjustment lever that I make is machined from solid, and Kawasaki's had 3 versions of that. And mine is better than any of them. It fits the shaft better, and I've re-indexed the slot so you can get more travel. And the biggest improvement after that is the torsion spring, because the torsion spring takes the slack out in the best possible way. The factory setup, the spring isn't captured, right? If it breaks, it falls down in the crankcase, can bounce around, do damage. It also constantly vibrates. The factory extension style spring constantly vibrates while the engine's running. And the torsion spring is captured. It doesn't vibrate. It takes slack out the best possible way. It's just a better setup.
Wow, that's cool. And this is possible for someone to do it on their own, or would you not recommend that?
If you're pretty handy, you can do it. If you know, we get all kinds of people in the KLR community because it has a reputation of being a friendly, easy to work on, bulletproof bike. And most of the time, I've got videos I send people when they order directly from me. And if they go to YouTube, you know, I've got stuff under Eagle Mike, and I'm glad if they call me, even on the weekends, and I know their engine's down, I'll call them back. You know, so most of the time, I would say 99.8% of the time, it's a success. And even more higher percentage than that. But guys either that think they know everything, or guys that can barely tell which end of the screwdriver to grab, we're going to be a problem. You know?
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Now, you know, the KLR community, right, is really passionate about the brand on these bikes, right? And this is kind of changing gears a little bit, going back to the rider. You know, how does someone know if the KLR is right for them? And, you know, what would be considered competition in this category now? There's actually not a lot of competition in this category if you look at the price point.
No,
Yeah.
not really.
Yeah, I mean, there's
DR 650, XR 650L. That's about it.
I'd probably say in the same category, I would also put the Himalayan in there, especially if you're worried about seat height.
But one thing I noticed about the Himalayan, like there's kind of like a community, almost like a cult following with the KLR 650, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And I notice you don't notice that with like the DRs or the DRZs or, you know, the XRs. But yeah. I am noticing that growing with the Himalayan.
Absolutely.
It kind of has a similar feel, the community around it, that, you know, I felt when I was first getting into the KLR 650s. So
yeah, right on, Mike. I mean, what do you think? Does the KLR stand as a class of its own?
It kind of does. You know, the XRL and the DR are great motorcycles. You know, we're blessed to have those bikes available. I don't have any experience with the Himalayan, but I think that the cool thing about the biggest thing is the community, and the doohickey and a few other things, you know, idiosyncrasies of the bike is what created this, because people had to get involved with their bike, and then they had to work with other people, right? We have these tech days, guys get together, share knowledge, help each other out. And I really think that's what has carried the bike. I think if the bike was truly perfect, I don't think it would be as successful as it has been. because you know you get emotionally invested in your sweat equity, right?
Your work, yeah, right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so now that you've all had a chance to kind of kick some tires on this, right? What improvements would you make to the new KLR? And tag this on to the end. Do you think the 2022 KLR generation will be the last generation of the KLR lineup? Like, if you went out and bought a KLR, what would you suggest people do to it? And then, do you think that this will be the last round of the KLR that we see before they bring out a whole new platform? Dan, you want to shoot that one first?
I mean, obviously the doohickey would be probably be one of the ones I would do. But other than that, you know, it's a great bike right out of the box. Maybe change the tires, and I would say 2023 will be, but who knows? I mean, the bike has paid for itself over and over again, even with these new changes in the bodywork. You know, I don't see why they wouldn't just keep it around anyways, even if they offer something that's more middleweight, you know, closely priced, you know, $3,000-4,000 more. You know, it gives that person, it gives Kawasaki the ability to have a move up customer, you know. So I don't see why they would get away with it, but if I had to guess, I'd say it'd go through 2023.
I think it might last longer as a model generation. You know what I mean? But yeah, it would be cool if they did bring something to upgrade. Jesse, what do you think?
Well, starting with a couple things, like right off the bat, like before I even did the doohickey, I changed on the first oil change, the drain plug. The plastic skid plate, if you're going to ride the bike off-road, the plastic skid plate and that stock drain plug is a disaster. So putting the low profile, and I haven't, what's that?
Plug, a low profile plug.
Low profile drain plug.
Okay.
And a better skid plate, a tougher skid plate, an aluminum or steel skid plate. I think those are two items that, like, right off the bat, if you're going to ride it off road, you want to take care of. I did learn the hard way, procrastinating on a drain bolt once. So that's always like the first thing that I'll do, because if you crack your case down there, it's just a nightmare fix. And yeah, I see this thing being around. I mean, I would think this generation has probably got a good, you know, probably 5 to 10 year spurt, as long as they can get away with the emissions. They don't come out with any weird new emissions restrictions. I see the KLR guys, you know, continuing to purchase this bike and keeping it in the mix as long as they're going to be for sale.
Right on. But
loyal fan base.
But do you think that, you know, after this generation, not this year, but after this generation, that they would actually have a next generation of KLR? Or do you think that they would keep the KLR name but move to a different platform, like a whole new platform, like Parallel Twin or something, but keep the KLR name? I mean, I'm really spitballing here.
That's a tough one, because the KLR is the KLR. You know, if it goes to a twin with
KLE,
yeah, it's going to a different model. But
KLRT,
yeah, I mean, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Mike, what do you think?
You know, I think this one's good for a while. I think I'd say maybe 24, 25. They might have decreased sales next year, or they might have enough momentum from built up demand, you know, because of the whole COVID thing. But because what they did in the Gen 2s when they came out, they sold the heck out of them in 8 and 9, and then there was a dead spot for 10. They only made a couple thousand, right? So I think this will go for probably 4 or 5 years. And what I think would be cool, I would hate to see this platform go away, because it's so universal. It's comfortable, easy to ride. You know, you sit way up in the air, you can see forever. You know, you can go over a curb if you have to. But think about it, if they made like a 500, 550, and then they made the 750, 800, had it like a family, have the 300, the 500, 550, the 800, where you could grow into each one.
Yeah.
And they've got the Versus 1000, but that's kind of a whole different bike.
It's sport touring, really. It's more of a sport touring bike.
Sport adventure.
Yeah. So I don't know if they could ever come out with another bike. I mean, you think about, this is pretty much the same bike for 35 years. That's pretty incredible. It's one reason it's friendly. The old British 650 twins, they weighed about 400 pounds, right? Maybe 4.5, had about 40 horsepower, most of them. KLR, pretty close. And we've got more suspension and more reliability for sure, right? So what's not to love?
Yeah, that's
more parts.
That's right. That's right. Well, all right, guys. It's been awesome. The clock has ticked over about 1 hour here, so we're going to wrap up with our last question. Do you guys have any words of advice or encouragement/wisdom to offer future adventure riders out there? Dan, what do you think? Go ahead, start with Dan.
Get out and explore. There's more adventure out your back door than you would ever imagine.
Right on, man. Here, here. Jesse?
Yeah, I would say, get out there and ride. Find some friends, find a group, find your niche with the adventure bike crowd. Get in there and start riding. I always like to say I've made some of my best friends through adventure bike riding, and just, being able to get out and explore with other people and make the memories. So if you've got an opportunity, if you have a bike, or if you don't have a bike, get a bike, get out there and start exploring.
Right on, man. Right on. And Mike,
100%.
Want to wrap it up for us tonight?
100% what they said. Just get on it and do it.
Yeah, right on.
Then one more thing, if Mike wants to get into the Himalayan market, it could be Himalayan Mike.
How many different versions of Mike can there be? Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff, guys. Well, all right, guys, please do stick around. Thank you for coming out tonight. Please do stick around while we green room after the show for a few minutes. But yeah, it's been totally awesome, and we'll talk in a few minutes, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, cheers.
All right,
brother.
Thanks, guys. Well, all right. What a great bunch of guys. Thanks again to Mike, Jesse, and Dan for joining us on tonight's KLR 650 episode. We think big things are in store for this bike, made for any road. Whether it's a hit or miss, there's a lesson I believe in still. To paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi, strength does not come from physical capacity, but from unstoppable will. All right. And please join us for the next ADVMoto Live number 30 this November, I believe 11th, when we talk about new bikes for 2022. ADVMoto editor Justin Coffey will be back from Portugal, where he will have had a chance to ride the new Norden 901. And they're having their junket out there, I believe, beginning of November. And I will have had a chance to go hang out with the folks at Royal Enfield in sunny California, hang out with Jesse again, too, as well. He'll be ride leading some stuff on a newly updated 2022 Himalayan. But as always, your support means a lot and keeps the motorcycle world running. Please visit adventuremotorcycle.com for more stories, news, reviews, and videos, podcasts, and more. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Plus, let us know what you'd like to see in the comments below. Until next time, everyone, from everybody here at ADVMoto, ride safe, have fun, and don't forget, the adventure is you.